And now we are out of the obligatory 7 seconds of LinkedIn garbage. Hello to the world. Good now to all of you. Welcome to BetaCodex Live on this Monday. Oh, no, it's not Monday. God only knows. It was Thursday, right? Thursday, February 29th, 2024. And whenever it happens to be for you in the future. I am Ryan Erickson, a contributing artist for the consulting firm of Red 42. And with me on the left side of your screen is management exorcist, leadership philosopher, noted author, Godzilla of management, and lead artist of Red 42, Mr. Niels Flaking. Hello, Niels.
Hello, and Ryan, this is our 30th second episode. So yeah, some patterns are forming. Some patterns are emerging in our little series of video casts here.
Yes. Yeah, we're all about emergence, aren't we?
Yes. In this particular episode, we continue our little series with special guests that we admire and cherish. We cherish their work. We want to know more about them and their history and their work.
Exactly. Which may be a theme going on in season 3, as it happens. We have our duets that we've been doing. We've started with trio jams, and then who knows, maybe we'll go quintets and beyond. So today, the theme as it came across, and with our special guest, who we'll introduce in a moment, is the absolute state. Degenerative, all the things degenerating in management, organizational development, and might we say capitalism as well, the system that drives the market and whatnot. And to speak about that with us today, we have a special guest, noted author and article writer, Mr. Ron PURSER. We are going to bring Ron into the studio now. Hello, Ron.
Hello.
Hello, Ron. We should note that, Ron, you have also been an academic, a researcher for decades.
Yeah, going back to 1990. That's correct.
And a consultant. You have been a consultant with
doing I was at one time, yes.
Mm-hmm. And what other things are you? You are a musician, a semi-professional? No, amateur? A semi-professional?
A hobby musician. Started out playing blues. Started quite late. I think I was 55 years old or 50 years old when I picked it up. And yeah, well, I may have, played a few open chords back when I was a teenager, but I didn't really know too much. So there was no YouTube back then to learn. So, but yeah. I play. I have a band. We play on the coast here.
You can say the name of the band as well.
Oh, really? Pacific Fault Line Band in the coast of Pacifica, California, just south of San Francisco here.
Fantastic. Yeah. I mean, we all have a knack. Ryan and I, we also have a knack for music, of course. Jazz in particular might be a theme between Ryan and myself, right? Ryan plays the bass, I play a guitar and a little bass, and so we could meet again for 3 guitars or three strings trio thing here, maybe 3 sets of strings.
Yeah, no, music is it's a whole different outlet, and it's a nice complement to being an intellectual and academic. It's allows one to tap into affective states more than expressive states, as you know.
Well, and what better expression of power width and flow and democratic forms and all of the kind of beautiful stuff that happens when people are in concert, in ensemble together, as opposed to, there not being a boss of music, the senior vice president of music to say, oh, you must comply with the musical form. Maybe conductor would, but yeah. So
yeah,
so there's an article that you wrote that connected Miles Davis to group work. Obviously the seminal work that brought you into beta world was the self-managing organization and the work you did back up and leading to, there you go. And was it 1998, 1999 when it was published?
1998, I think that book came out, The Free Press. Yeah, Simon & Schuster.
Yeah. So As far as so now going from the musical, which we could take another 75 minutes for, would you mind telling our audience out there now and into the future, kind of who you are, what you do, and why you do it at this
And
point?
what got you in the field? Maybe we do it chronologically a little bit. What got you into the field?
Yeah, that might be a bit easier.
Yeah. I
Well,
also have a book that indicates that.
oh
we
yeah,
period.
yeah. That was a book I did with Marilyn Emery, Fred Emery's wife, who is still alive. I've just found out.
Yes.
Anyway,
still
we'll get to her. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, where do we start? I don't know. Maybe we'll start with my blue collar background. I worked as an industrial electrician. I was quite lucky. I had been studying electronics and stuff on my own, and there was a big push at the Pullman Standard plant, which on the south side of Chicago, to hire a bunch of people because they were working on a contract for building New York subway cars at the time. And so I got hired right out of high school, and I was making pretty good money for like 1973. And it was a great place to work. It was a great place to work because I had a lot of buddies. I made a lot of buddies back then. Pipe fitters, other electricians, welders. It was a great time. Of course, this was the early 70s too. But it was an education in itself because I got to feel firsthand what it was like to be treated as an hourly worker, selling my labor.
Yes.
And the sort of treatment I witnessed, not just myself, but other people, between supervisors and hourly workers. That made a really strong impression on me. And I held numerous jobs too after that at various factories in the Chicago area. And it took me a while to come around to decide that I don't want to punch a time clock the rest of my life. I guess maybe I'll go to college. So I eventually made it to college. Started in, late, most people.
How old were you?
When I was 23 or so.
No,
Not that late, but yeah, most people go when they're 18, 19. And I thought, okay, I'll study psychology. And I started studying psychology, but it was not the kind of psychology that I thought I was going to study. It was experimental behaviorism, rat psychology. And I said, I got to get out of this place. This is not for me. And so I found this very unusual program in the Northern California. It was a program in humanistic psychology, very California, obviously. And it was very innovative. And I was very interested in studying depth psychology, Carl Jung, Gestalt, studying, dream interpretation, all kinds of cool stuff. And so I had a great time there. I didn't want to leave. I think it took me 4 more years to get my degree because I was having so much fun. And then I happened to take a class in the business school. Well, at first I took a class on the quality of work life. I think it was the psychology of work. Like, what the heck is this stuff? What, they're working with factories and they're trying to work on, labor management cooperation? I'm like,
which
wait a
related
minute.
to your own work experience.
I was like, holy crap. I'm like, where was this when I was working? This is really interesting material. And then I took a class in organizational behavior in the business school. And I thought I was going in the direction of becoming a clinical psychologist. And I asked my professor, hey, where does one study more about organizational development? He says, well, you should go where I went, Case Western Reserve University. And so I applied and I got accepted. I got lucky. I was able to jump ship from a bachelor's degree to a doctoral program. So I kind of gained the time I lost from starting college late. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's how I landed up at Case in the OB program, which was an amazing program. I can't say how wonderful it was in terms of deep learning, collaboration, working with people like Bill, who you had on your program, Bill Passmore.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Bill was your teacher,
He was
professor?
my dissertation advisor. Yes, he took me under his wing.
Yes.
One of the most generous people I've ever met in terms of his generosity and care. A remarkable scholar
Yes.
as well.
Yes.
So yeah, that was really pivotal for me. And you know, I was enamored as I was totally taken in by the kind of messianic zeal of the field of OD. You know, here we are, change
The energy was
agents.
very high at the time, right? If we
Yeah, OT was sort of in, you know, I wouldn't say it was at its peak, but it certainly was still up there.
Yeah.
There were OD departments in almost every Fortune 100, 500 company, big staff, you know, like at Exxon Chemicals, General Electric, P&G, as you know. Yeah, everyone had a lot of resources
and that was
for OD.
probably strongly influenced by socio-technical systems thinking and the movement.
Yeah, the whole movement. I mean, even before that, you know, with Herb Shepard and the T group movement, sensitivity training, NTL, all those early OD initiatives had penetrated into corporations. I know that Exxon did a tremendous amount of work with T groups for managers. They would go off for a week or, you know, a week at a time. That'd be unheard of today, to spend that amount of time. And but yeah, it was a different time. It was a different time, and there was a lot of literature being published at the time, a lot of studies. You know, the organizational development and change group at the Academy of Management was kind of bustling and thriving and exciting. So yeah, it was. I would say it was at the crest, or coming down from the crest, but it was up there.
And you did your dissertation in the 80s, early 80s, mid 80s. When did that happen?
Well, I got the case in '85, and I got out in 1990. So I would say from the early '80s to the mid '90s, you know, there was still a lot of activity around OD. But then, as you know, reengineering came in, and quality, some quality movements too, that began to kind of erode those functions. And then we had, anyway, so yeah.
What was your dissertation topic, if I might ask?
Yeah, my dissertation topic was building on Kel Pava's work on non-routine sociotechnical systems, the knowledge work.
Okay.
Finding a new methods for conducting STS, sociotechnical systems, but in knowledge work, mostly new product development. This particular research effort was at Polaroid, at their R&D facility. Of course, Polaroid doesn't exist now, but yeah, it was outside of Cambridge, and spent about 6 months there. I actually lived in Boston for 3 months. I was fortunate that a scientist who was on the design team, I think he got married and went on a long honeymoon. He said, here's my condo in the Back Bay of Boston. You can have it for 3 months. Here's my car. Drive it to Waltham, you know. So it was a fantastic time. But yeah, we basically, Bill and I developed a process that we can analyze deliberations, to look at effective deliberations, and what were the variances in knowledge work was the kind of the focus. So yeah.
And at that time, because you're coming out with your PhD, early '90s, your reengineering is happening. At that point, what was the consulting environment? What did you land into from where you were in academia? Because at that in the book, you talk about Polaroid and Maestro management and all this kind of stuff.
Oh yeah.
And yes, that book right there. And Did you find that when you landed, and how did your ideas of how the world should be compare with how the world was when you went into the wide world of consulting?
Yeah. Well, I landed out of graduate school. I was fortunate to land my first academic job at Loyola University of Chicago in a standalone master's program in organizational development. So it was pure OD, the whole curriculum, and it was students who were working during the day at various corporations in the Chicago area, and then coming in for evening courses. So these were students who were wanting to be either internal OD consultants within their own firms, or to go off on their own and become an external OD consultant. And at that time, there was still a lot of there was a burgeoning interest in knowledge work and how to apply STS principles to knowledge works. We did some work at Procter and Gamble as well, um, and also at that time I became very interested in large group methods, particularly the Future Search Conference, or the Search
Yeah.
Conference that Fred Emery and Eric Trist first developed, and then Marilyn Emery from Australia in Canberra with her husband were the pioneers in that methodology. And I really got intrigued by that methodology. And of course, even at Case, we were all studying Eric Trist and Fred Emery, but their writings were a bit difficult for, you could say, the practitioner.
Yes.
They were in Human Relations, the journal Human Relations, and other. And
part of the writing was really difficult, right?
it was it was really difficult. Yes.
I remember the article about the coal mine. Oh my God, it's very
Mhm.
technical about mining, right? And one wonders why. Why is all that here? You today, as a reader, you do not understand that so fully. But you were interested in the practical applications, apparently. That's why you got interested.
Well, I was super interested in theory and practice, and I was always an advocate that you couldn't have one without the other.
Yes.
Or you couldn't have
Very
practice
important.
without theory. There's nothing so practical as a good theory. The Kurt Levine famous saying, right? And that bothered me when I saw people doing stuff without having a guided kind of a theory behind it. So I don't know how it happened, but somehow I got in touch with Marilyn Emery.
Well, in your book, The Self-Managing Organization, you write that you visited Eric Trist.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Towards the end of his life.
Towards the end of his life. Yeah, we went down to Gainesville. Marvin.
And you tried to set up a conference or something with him.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, Marvin Weisbord and I.
You were also close to Marvin Weisbord.
Yeah, we went down to Gainesville to see Eric, and we were at that time in the process of designing a summit, an STS summit, socio-technical systems summit, to look at kind of the state of the field and where it should be going. It was a search conference, basically, on the state of STS. And we held it at the top of the Hyatt Hotel here in San Francisco. We had about 80 people from all over the world. It was, you're bringing back some good memories here.
What year? This was 1990?
No, I think that was around 1992 or so. And Fred Emery was there as well. He came too as well.
Yes. So exactly. Then you met Fred Emery as well.
You know what? That's how I met Marilyn. Now that I think of it, she showed up, and because I was teaching at Loyola, we brought in we had these weekend workshops, and I invited her to do a workshop for the master's students at Loyola, to do a workshop on how to lead a search conference, how to facilitate and design a search conference. So I brought her to Chicago, and it was like a 3 or 4 day workshop. And I remember we were sitting at a bar somewhere at some hotel that she was at, and I said, I think I could help you with this. You want to write a book together, and I'll try to get some U.S. case studies, and she said, yeah, let's do it. And so we got Josie Bass, which is now John Wiley, to pick up the book. And that was a collaboration between me and Marilyn. And Fred wrote the epilogue to that too. So yeah, that's how that happened. Yeah.
So you're close. You're linkage to some of our heroes: Eric Trist, Fred Emery, Marilyn Emery.
Yeah, it's sort of a lineage, isn't it?
And the whole
yeah, of course. Yes.
And the whole group process movement as well, you know, that there's so many of these whole systems approaches that just they make so much sense, right? In the STS domain, we're talking about all these luminaries, and that how this, it just seems so natural to be, if you involve the people doing the work in the process of designing the work, you think good things will happen, and they did. And it's so, well, here we are in 2024, and you know, what the hell happened?
It's a good question, and I'm probably not the right person to ask, because I sort of disassociated myself. That's a word. At some point, I started to feel not disenfranchised, disappointed, a bit. I just saw that you know, these things were great, but they never stuck. You know, it seemed like you would have these pockets of innovation that were empirically sound in terms of producing results. And we all know the story that Eric Trist was also very disappointed about that as well. And they were started on the periphery of, we would be doing like experiments in a particular plant, right? And then try to hold that plant up as an example to the rest of the corporation.
Yes.
And the center of power in the corporation would say, well, maybe that works over there because of this and because of that, but it wouldn't work everywhere else, you know. And but what was really
McGregor's consulting work, to Eric Trist consulting work, to whom else might we mention? Maybe even
Paul Tuchinski.
Oh yeah, I remember Paul. Yeah, so it's the center periphery. I think Eric Trist wrote about that too, in a book that really didn't have the right title. It was called "All Teams Are Not Created Equal." He wrote about that with Lyman Ketchum, Lyman was one of the general managers at in General Foods, and so they worked together on a number of projects. But I think it goes deeper than that too. It's not just that it doesn't start at the center and move outwards. The center is threatened by the loss of power, and then there's other issues, institutional obstacles too, to making democracy at work actually something that is not just a participatory intervention, but an actual shift in terms of workers having a real say in even the policy of what's being produced. For example, like, do workers have a say in producing toxic chemicals? You know, you can have a participative program, but do they have a say in, hey, why are we producing these toxic chemicals? You know, no, they don't.
By the way, what we might mention at this point, that your one of your latest publications, your beautiful article from Current Affairs, Against Managerialism, it traces this problem, this dilemma, or this, that we are stuck in the same command and control thing for decades. You trace it there, I would say, to something like a managerialist industrial complex that exists between the executive elite or the managerial elite, business schools, and maybe something like, can I frame it in a way, a terrible understanding of market economics or capitalism? I think you put the pieces together in that article.
We could qualify it like that, yeah.
Yeah, it was my way of framing it, of course.
No, I think, yeah.
I think that's what you're saying in the article.
No, it's a beautiful way of putting it. It's how did you say that? It was the something. I want to write that down.
We have it recorded.
Okay.
Yes.
But I think
it is a complex. It is a
the managerial industrial complex kind of.
Well, no, business schools too. It's all
Oh,
within that. Yeah, it's all kind of a collusion there between these.
What do your business school students say about this? Because they are at the same time victims.
I don't
and,
know because
we did some teaching yesterday.
I'm pretty low key in my school. I keep a low profile in terms of teaching.
Okay.
That's another long story, I think, too. I tried, let's say 20 years ago, of shaking up the management department.
Yes.
When we were going through a curriculum review, and I said, why are we becoming a vocational feeder school for, just an entry level, for students just to get an entry level job? Is that what education's for? Just to give them these skills that'll probably be obsolete, 5 years from now? Shouldn't we be actually providing a liberal arts education? I mean, it is called undergraduate degree,
Yes.
a broad liberal education. And so at that time, there was a push. I think it was the Carnegie Foundation that was saying that, even business schools should. Peter Drucker was big on this. He was saying management is a liberal art. And so, why aren't we bringing liberal arts, full force into business education?
Yes.
And there's all kinds of constraints around that with accreditation agencies, and I never understood them because it stultified creativity and promoted conformism across all business schools. But say that, okay, we got the cookie cutter program that everybody else does, so you're accredited. I'm like, well, that seemed really strange. I can never grok that.
Ryan, you first.
Well, I was going to say, it sounds like another movement we have talked about, maybe tangentially, about the agile software development world and the retail certifications and all this kind of accreditation and legitimacy being applied to this certification mill of saying, hey, you got 3 letters after your name, and it's not even through a 4-year degree program; it's through a week or 2 weeks or 2 days of certification. And there's a lot of money in that too. So I mean, this is it's not an artistic way of going. There's not like, hey, I have an art certificate. I'm now an artist, right?
I would like to connect that, Ron, if you allow, with a few words from your own book from 1998, The Self-Managing Organization, which had a profound influence on me. I will read out a few passages from the start, right? You write here, you wrote this together with Stephen Cabana, Self-Managing Organization. And you write here in the preface, we soon realized that many companies which adopted such methods, I think you're relating to re-engineering, total quality, and so on. These companies that adopted such methods were caught in the middle between 2 competing organizational paradigms, the bureaucratic and the democratic. In our analysis, these methods failed to transform the DNA or fundamental design principle that informs how organizations are structured and managed. When we understood that these 2 diametrically opposed traditions for designing and managing organizations, democratic and bureaucratic, were competing for dominance, it became clear to us why managers and employees were often bombarded with mixed messages and a confusing mishmash of structures, management styles, and techniques. And to close this off, until there is fundamental change in the design principles underlying organizations, executives will keep searching for the next panacea. Like unsuspecting sheep, the consulting wolves will descend upon their paradigm paralysis. Beautiful. It is poetry. And of course, it leaves us thinking, what the hell changed between then and now? Nothing, right? Nothing changed. We're still stuck in the same dilemma.
Well, it's hard to say, but starting as early as 1980, the trend was more and more towards economic neoliberalism too. With Thatcher and Reagan. From there on, even Bill Clinton, the economic policies were such that tremendous pressure to, well, we see sort of a conservative
We
kind
see
of,
an authoritarian backslash, right?
yeah,
In that
conservative
era.
movement to individualism and privatization. And I think the whole focus, the whole zeitgeist at that time was moving away from group processes and participation and social programs. And I don't know. There was something in kind of the underlying cultural zeitgeist that was, just focusing on, quantitative results at any cost. So we saw downsizing and reengineering,
Yes.
being able to show, quicker results from a bottom line perspective.
Austerity, cost
Austerity,
management, a
cost
shareholder
management,
value.
all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, when the whole field of OD and STS started to go downhill.
Can I read something more
Yeah.
from the last chapter of your book, the epilogue of your book from 1998? As a social movement, you write, together with Stephen Gabbana, democracy at work can help to rehabilitate society, reinvigorating many of our cherished ideals, which were founded on the belief that all people are created equal, that all people deserve to live in freedom and with a measure of dignity. Bringing democracy to the workplace is a noble cause. Such a movement can help to reverse many of the debilitating and regressive trends in society by empowering people to take responsibility for their actions and for the common good. How can society expect people to be responsible citizens if they are alienated and disenfranchised for the durations of their working lives? Active citizenship in society requires employees who can participate in decision-making. Beautiful. I have nothing to add. Case closed, right? That's what we still need.
Yeah.
We need organizational democracy.
Yeah.
Organizational
I mean,
citizenship.
you can hear the idealism in that statement, but I think it still stands.
Well, and I think this brings us right back into the current article where you
Okay.
really just kind of eviscerate Elton Mayo and the human relations movement.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
and that, well, this is just, we're just putting a nice little sheen on the authoritarian hierarchy, and that you feel okay. If you feel okay in this environment, we're gonna be nice to you. We're gonna be benevolent so that you don't rock the boat. You should be happy with what you have. And
Yes, you do a brilliant job describing this. The neo-authoritarianism that is already embedded in Elton Mayo's work, and the behaviorist roots of so much pseudo psychology at work.
Well, you said there's, and I'm going to read from this article, Mayo's skepticism towards democracy and politics had already taken shape, by the time he was in there. And again, skipping here, there's a persistent tendency in Mayo's work to transform any challenge by workers to managerial control into evidence of psychiatric disturbance. So that if you challenge the structure that's in place, you're defective as a human being, which that's
it was pretty
kind
crazy.
of damning.
I mean, when I first came across Richard Gillespie's work, which is the manufacturing of knowledge, I think is his book. He's a curator in Australia, and he went into the original archival data of the Hawthorne experiments, things that weren't even published in the official accounts. And I was stunned. I couldn't believe it, because the Hawthorne studies and Elton Mayo, particularly the Hawthorne studies, is an organizational myth. It's a mythology, which,
I mean, Rufus tried to distance himself from what Elton Mayo had published, right? He wrote a whole treatise, I think a book about his different findings, different ways.
Yeah, he was much more meticulous and empirical. Mayo was an ideologist. and
Well, you say he was a
ideologue.
snake oil salesman and a charlatan.
I think I used that term, but
and a fraud. I mean, he was a fraud.
He was a fraud.
Yeah,
You think
was
you
a
said
fraud.
he was a fraud?
He was a fraud. Well, he was.
He was a fraud.
He was a fraud.
faked the
I mean,
doctorate.
he passed himself off as a a doctor. Whether it was a doctor of philosophy or a medical doctor, he was neither. Well, he tried to be a medical doctor and he failed the exam 3 times. He only had a bachelor's degree in philosophy, and yeah, so he was a fraud. But I think the reason why I critiqued Mayo and the Hawthorne studies, because I think the way I put it was the wolf in sheep's clothing, that then sort of the whole field of organizational behavior was built upon, right? And to this day, the textbooks in management, open any introductory textbook, and it's going to propagate that same myth of the Hawthorne studies. I don't know why, because as I dug into this research, I mean, there were tons of critiques of Mayo and Hawthorne studies in this, in the 60s, 70s, tons. So, why are these textbook authors, who are scholars, ignoring this and just, looking the other way? I mean, one, either they are not aware of it, or two, they're aware of it and they're covering it up. Why?
There's this fantastic critical researcher from New Zealand, Todd Bridgman.
He's great. He's great.
Who debunks the let's say the ideology and the authoritarian dogma that is promoted by textbooks. Never trust a management textbook. That's basically what we should take from it. Read The Self-Managing Organization by PURSER and Cabana. It's much better. Yeah, in every way, I think. You do a fine job here in describing the dilemma at the time. Right? I think Marvin Weisbord wrote this fantastic book, Productive Workplaces.
Oh, yeah, it was a great book. Yeah.
Like those two together make the whole course, I think.
Yeah, and so, I think what human relations did is that it wanted to present this kind of facade that employees have this bottom-up power, right? They want to kind of assuage employees in such a way, because there's a contradiction going on, right? We talked about the
command and control.
Pardon?
Can we agree that command and control disguises itself in ever-changing ways?
Oh, absolutely.
Today in the shape of holacracy, OKRs, and so on.
Yeah, I mean, that's what fads are about. Management fads are always trying.
And you wrote this beautiful book about one of them.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah.
The mega fad, maybe your most successful book, probably.
It is, yeah.
By now.
Yeah.
Mac Mindfulness, a crushing treatise on the mindfulness industry. You have to have it. You have to read. You have to laugh and you have to cry, right?
Yeah, I hope you got some good laughs. I mean, the part on corporate mindfulness, the chapters are. I attended a number of workshops on corporate mindfulness, and
you did that for yourself.
Yeah, it was. I tried to put a little humor in it.
Yes, you visited the conference and so on, but you tell this very well a little bit in the new article,
right?
As well, your approximation to that. Yes. So what do we? By the way, you're talking. The problem with our conversation is maybe you're talking to people who believe in in the optimism, as you call it. Did you call it optimism?
Optimism
from this book, that it is possible. To create the democratic organization, full-fledged. Here and now, regardless of size, it is possible to create this kind of organization. We believe in it. So it's interesting that you, to me, it's a little interesting, but it's very interesting, because I would of course see the update and the new book on this. The update.
Not from me.
Optimistic.
Not from me.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
by the way, you did these research books as well, which are great as well.
Oh my God.
Social creativity.
I don't know what to say.
I'm a fan.
The PURSER compendium is on your shelf, Niels. But and not to toot the BetaCodex own horn, but in the self-managing organization, you have participatory design, cell structure design, that, and you have the search conference, and which is open space beta, which is open space technology, which is my passion, and that it kind of splits it into two parts. And if you put those things together, I mean, it's not as if
No, you're right.
we don't have the tools.
You're right. There's a thread through all of that, isn't there? Yeah.
At the risk of sounding like your fans here, there are two magnificent topics, I think, in this. And Ryan, you just nailed it, I think, in describing it. There are these two fantastic insights. There are two models battling for dominance, authoritarianism and democracy, or bureaucracy and democracy, so to speak, organization. The Follettian school is the democratic school in our minds, and the Tayloristic school, the other school. They are battling for dominance. And the second, I think, great theme, Ryan just mentioned it beautifully, is that you say, and this for me was a novel idea when I read it in 2006, this idea that you cannot bring about the democratic organization with change method that is undemocratic. Of course, this is also, I mean, rooted in Levine, Trist, Emery's, and Passmore, and everybody, and Marvin Weisbord contributed as well. But the way you frame this here is so fantastic. The method needs to be fitting with the outcome.
Yeah, the method has to be congruent with the actual ideal of democracy, right?
Yes. You talk about first principles, right? That is building from the first principle of bureaucracy versus democracy, Niels. I mean, you nailed it there. And as you did in the book, is that, and this I think also comes into what we talked about in the agile world, in the world of software development, which is, software is eating the world, and now you're developing software faster and faster and faster. Well, in a hierarchical organization, you do that from IT. You're just trying to turn people into machines to produce software in a factory. And so the contention here is that you can only have an agile organization if you have a beta organization, when a center and periphery, where the periphery is in true control, steered from market forces and customer need and what you want to do for the customer versus the hierarchy and the OKRs and the shareholder value and all that kind of stuff. So that, and I think it's also interesting that your book came out right as the Agile Manifesto was happening. So that you're in 98, 99, and the manifesto comes out in 2001. And why was it that the folks who sat on the mountain in Snowbird, Utah, didn't think about that from that perspective, that we're trying to put wings on a fish, and that kind of thing, as opposed to, why don't we think deeper about the whole organization as opposed to just making the lives better for the software developers, which is noble, which is human relations, saying, oh, we want to make life better for the software developers, but we don't want to make life that good. So that's
Ryan dealing with his trauma from the agile movement, right? So
well,
we all have traumas here.
I'm gonna raise the flag and do my best, play that game as well as I can. So,
well, I think maybe the question is, does management really want to sign up for a program that goes that far in workplace democracy? It's. I mean, we saw from history what happened when the Topeka plant, for example, the General Foods plant, and it went too far. The experiment went too far in terms of decision making and control, to such an extent that the workers wanted to hire their own people, do the hiring, vote in raises. And management didn't sign up for that. Right? They didn't sign up. They said, yeah, participation, great. That we're all for it. Makes people feel better. We get a little bit more performance, but we have to draw the line somewhere. Right?
Golden participation. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think until you can crack that egg, I don't see any really radical transformation happening. We're just going to keep circling through fads. And so we have this contradiction, as I was saying, we have this contradiction. We're living, well, now it's even questionable whether we're living in a democratic society. But we do have,
America.
well, here, yeah, but we do have the ideals. of democracy that we grew up with, the idea of democratic values. But when they cross the line into when they walk through the door, punch the time clock, or start working on software, those democratic values are sort of put on hold. And so, how do you deal with the contradiction? Well, that's where OD and human relations, let's make them feel that they have power. Let's say, we're going to create a strong culture, right? Let's make it like people feel that they have bottom-up power. And, that could kind of assuage a little bit of the loss of dignity. But in reality, the top-down hierarchy is still alive and well. And push comes to shove, they call the shot.
Yes. Well, in your book from 1998, you cite a few examples of organizations who went beyond command and control and who I think maintained the democratic sense. W.L. Gore, here on page 8 or so in your book. Southwest Airlines, W.L. Gore, all on the same page, right? Whole Foods, not so much anymore, maybe, but W.L. Gore, Southwest Airlines, they kept the promise. I think even Toyota did so. There's some other wonderful cases. So I think, but the question remains, what maybe the one of authorization, right? How do we get authorization from executives, owners, executives, managers, top managers, CEOs of this world to do this kind of transformation? Our hypothesis is always that everybody wants beta, everybody deserves beta, if organizational democracy, short for organizational democracy, right? We call it beta, as you might have seen. And if they do seem to not want it, they still haven't understood what is at stake. And I think this book, for example, does a terrific job at explaining what is at stake. Yeah. As does the work of Peter Drucker. Kurt Lewin, you say here in your book, I have to quote that as well because it's so beautiful. It's just full of. You're a fantastic writer, I must say, and you put this so well here in the book. We stand on the shoulders of giants like Fred Emery, Eric Trist, Kelvin Pava, Bill Pasmo, and Kurt Lewin. And we might add Mary Parker Follett and so many more, right? Our organizations aren't as democratic as our societies could be or are potentially, and so there is this constant conflict between our work lives, organizational citizens, and our societies. So organizations haven't matched the potential that our societies have given people.
Yeah, well, that's really a good point. That's really a good point. Yeah, there is this disconnect, isn't there, between our public lives and in the workplace and our private values as well. There's kind of a, it's interesting. I just touched on it briefly, but the pandemic, when people were working remotely, a lot of people were working remotely. They had a pause, right? And it was a pause in the sense of, what's really important? Working 24/7, or maybe my family. I like to be in nature. I like to take walks. Maybe working 60 hours a week is not something I want to do again. I think there was a real shift in the culture during the pandemic. And it's very interesting, especially in tech. Almost everyone was working remotely. And then once things started to improve, all these big tech companies that were sort of on the vanguard of letting people work remotely suddenly said, you got to get back. Yeah. Get back to the office at least 3 days a week. And there was an uproar. That was a big uproar. And there still is. But I think the point I'm making there is that if the work was getting done without any hiccups, then why? Why do they have to go back to the office? And one of my theories is it's power. It's corporeal power. The feeling that, I can wield my power by seeing you kind of kowtow to me in the office.
Sure. Sure.
And
people with weak self-esteem want others to feel bad and want to suppress others. And
I mean, it's probably not totally that. There's also the issue of, shareholders are going to ask questions. We just spent $2 billion on this building. Well, why is it empty? Why? What's going on there? All the real estate in San Francisco and downtown, empty buildings, commercial real estate. But I think it also goes back to, some people say, well, we have to have people there because that's how innovation happens, through water cooler conversations, these kind of impromptu,
some social
the Apple
the
concept.
encounter and-
spontaneous collaboration is the term that's used now. But there's so much technology now for that to happen, that I don't buy that. I don't buy that reason.
Well,
Anyway.
I think that there's also, I think there's a philosophical thing that the managers, the people doing that gig, are not the problem. That it is the systems that surround them, that they've been taught, that they've learned in business school, bless their hearts,
Mhm.
and that
Very good.
that it is, as organizational design and development consultants, it is our responsibility to grant them the dignity that says you're not evil, but you're within the system, that there in these incentives that we're talking about, right? And this is Alfie Kohn too, talking about the individual incentives. And if I'm getting individual incentives based on stock price, and I'm competing with other executives here, I mean, this is it's all of this rising status wrangling, but it's the system that's taught. And that, what is the aha that helps those folks say, I'm done with this now?
By the way, this is a beautiful, I think, to remember that when the COVID crisis happened, organizations failed to change anything in their systems. Right? They took this as they had to implement Zoom and whatever web conferencing tech stuff, but they failed to adjust their social system. Nothing. Right?
Yeah.
They didn't abolish the budgeting process, the individual target setting, the bonus systems, none of that. So how can you expect more intelligent teamwork, team empowerment, or team responsibility to happen, organizational democracy to happen, if you do not change the system? It couldn't happen. And by the way, we did a transformation with a client at the time. We started it before the COVID month, let's say, starting March. We started, I think, in February 2020, and then COVID hit. So we had to do the open space. We do not use search conferences. We use open space twice in these transformations, to begin it and end the transformation, to time box transformations. And so we had this first lockdown happening when the first open space was supposed to happen. And we had to rethink about how to do that, of course. And that company, of course, they with that change in their system, they had the opportunity to adjust their way of working together. Everybody had to adjust their ways of working together, because they now are teams in a cell structure and so on. So I think most organizations just missed the opportunity and implemented tools. Again, as you say in your book, they implemented tools instead of changing to a different paradigm.
Yeah. Yeah.
We don't have to agree.
Well, no, I see what you're saying. There's something else going on, though. I think that David Graeber's work is really, really, really good about this, and he talks about managerial feudalism, and I think there's a lot to that. There's a lot of work. You should know this. There's a lot of work that is not really producing that much value. But and we talk about the lean and mean organization, but there's so much, so many jobs, as Graeber would say, bullshit jobs that really are not that important or contributing, real value. So this idea of feudalism, managerial feudalism, I think has validity. That another reason why Yeah.
By feudalism, you mean each manager has a fiefdom, and that they're judged by the number of direct reports they have, and that kind of thing. That there's this territorialism. Is that what you mean by
That's part of it.
feudalism?
Yeah, that's part of it. But I think the other thing is the social contract is that when an employee is hired as a salaried employee from 9 to 5, a 9 to 5 employee, and so the expectation before COVID was, you show up and you have to, we bought your labor, and so we decide where that labor occurs. And if we say it occurs in the office, then it occurs in the office, right? From 9 to 5, we own you. And so it's kind of the feudal kind of attitude that I think is also responsible for this big flip-flop back to the office. And I was thinking of Irving Goffman's work when he looked at total institutions. He had interest in like psychiatric hospitals, prisons, right? And there was this sort of enclosure. The enclosure movement is back to the office, and we need to preserve this total institution, and that's a threat to work remotely. Again, it's all about a threat to power and hierarchy, I think.
Yes, but then, can I disagree a little bit with
sure.
you at this? It's we don't have to agree again, because in your book today, I found this beautiful bit, more or less in the middle of it. You talk about command and control, and you say it leads to what Marilyn Emery in 1995 has referred to as a crisis of responsibility, and I think that is the true theme. The command and control organizations, authoritarian organizations, they couldn't produce this learned helplessness. I think Marvin Weisbord or somebody called it like that. It produces this crisis of authority that in your book, I think you say that this leads to team leaders or middle managers being irresponsible by system, by design. But I think today the crisis is even more profound. We see this growing into a crisis of not institutions, but of even CEOs today do not have the power, do not have full responsibility. It seems that command and control, 100 years of command and control since Frederick Taylor or more, have totally driven out any sense of responsibility. And of course, they have brutalized organizations in a way. And I would say this brutalization is increasing. But my feeling is that if we call it feudalism, then we make it seem as if there are winners, and I do not believe that command and control organizations produce any winners.
Well, maybe not the organizations, but certainly the investors, but
they lose too.
Really? Jeff Bezos is losing, and Elon Musk is losing.
Yeah, in the short run. In the long run, they will end up in prison. At least one of them.
Well, maybe.
No, I think there's more win than I think we all take this for granted, that profit is just one facet. By the way, I think you write about this as well here, that profit is just one facet of success, right?
Well, I think the other issue is growth.
At any cost. Growth at any cost.
Well, yeah,
because we call that micro mono maximization, right? Focusing on one stupid thing: growth, profit. It's a stupid
extraction.
Yeah, extraction. Yeah.
And whatever it takes to extract, to reduce cost and increase profit and increase growth, that's where everyone loses, as you're saying. If they can just get rid of the organization, they would do it. If they could keep growing. I mean, with AI, we might see a lot of that.
Yeah. Is that really so?
I don't know.
I think, who is happier? The shareholder of Handelsbanken, Europe's most successful bank for 50 years, and they've been doing this. Not in your book. This case is not in your book, but it was the biggest case that the Beyond Budgeting movement encountered already 25 or so years ago. Handelsbanken, Swedish bank, Europe's most successful bank in every indicator for more than 50 years, since 1971, right? who wouldn't want to be a shareholder in that bank? I mean, in terms of extraction, Deutsche Bank, other stupid banks in America or in Germany or wherever have been short-term profitable, on the short term, but not the long term. Toyota is much more successful than any even Tesla. I mean, Tesla is not successful.
Well, yeah, right. It's a lot of subsidies.
It's just a little bubbly. It's just a bubbly thing, you know. But it will soon bubble away. I mean, it's built on the wrong ethics.
Well, I think command and control is just another code word for managerialism too. And,
yes, sure.
And
sure.
that, right? And so, like you say, that it's overtaken society, not just in private corporations. You know, it's overtaken healthcare. It's overtaken universities.
Yes.
And so, you know, we've kind of, you know, I think Henry Giraud, great critical scholar, talks about the disimagination machine. We have a hard time imagining any alternative because it's so pervasive. It's become.
We have to be founding fathers to imagine a better future.
Yeah, we have to become kind of founding fathers again, in a way, well, kind of renewal of that.
I think
or founding fathers and mothers, right?
Yeah, of course.
Founding families, founding families,
and everything beyond and in between, of course. Founding fathers, mothers, everything beyond and in between, of course. Yeah.
And I think another thing you talk about in the first book, in the self-managing organization, is about speak that there are folks who they're vested in hierarchy and bureaucracy, and not to demonize them, but you must learn to speak in their language and show them that you understand the benefits of efficiency, and that, yes, I understand that, and to be able to speak in that language is because why are you telling me I'm some kind of evil monster? Look at the results I have. You know, how dare you? So I thought that was an interesting part in the book too, that maybe as you know, Niels, you and I kind of sit on this mountaintop and have this, some folks think that we're saying, oh, managers, you're shit, you know, you're right. Evil. What you're
public
doing
shaming is never a good strategy.
And no, and I exactly, we have to drive out the evil within. That's everything. We have to exercise management from people. People are not the problem. It's the belief in command control, right? The beliefs that in theory, X assumptions and so on. I think you do a fine job in.
Well, yeah, that's where business schools come back in, right? I mean, because they are the transmitters of managerialism, the ideology of managerialism. And that's why I sort of end that piece in Current Affairs magazine with kind of a bashing of the B school, the business school. So now I'm not, I really have to give credit to my colleague Martin Parker in the UK, who wrote this wonderful book called Shut Down the Business School a few years back. And he, you know, there's a group, I don't know if you're aware of them, an academic group called Critical Management Studies group.
Yes, of course. Todd Bridgman is a
okay, yeah, and Andre Spicer, who actually became the dean, I think, of well, it used to be called Goldsmith in London. They changed the name. I can't remember the name now, but he's one of the pioneers too. Hugh Wilmot in the UK, another pioneer in this area. And that's how I was able to survive, I think, academically. Was I kind of discovered them about 15 years ago, and
it's a very small
fraction. In fact, Andre Spicer just came out with a new article. I think it's an organization journal or organizational studies, kind of a looking back on the critical management. I haven't read it yet, but looking back on critical management scholars and the problems that they have as well. Where did they go wrong in terms of having a larger impact? So I'm looking forward to reading that piece. You might want to interview Andre. Andre Spicer is a remarkable young scholar, and he wrote a book about bullshit too. I can't remember the title.
Okay.
Yeah, management bullshit or something. Yeah.
All right. That sounds about right. That sounds about right. I mean, we both have been part of this critical movement for quite a while. I mean, I've been there 20 years, you a bit longer, a tad longer still. So one wonders, right? When do we get out of the mess collectively, individually, but also collectively? And I personally, I think the hope is in doing the work with organizations too. I mean, doing better teaching, doing better research, and doing better consulting work.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we developed. I mean, I see our work on open space beta very much as a continuation of your book on the search conference with Marilyn Emery.
Mm-hmm.
It's just to think about these. What method do we need to make transformation happen fast, reliably fast, together with all the willing, without coercion, democratically, together with all the willing, and everybody becoming a co-designer of the organization. That's what we need to. Otherwise, it will never stick.
Well,
otherwise, you do something, walk away, and it will all fall apart.
And one thing that you've told me, Niels, a lot, and as we've talked, is that a manager, someone with authority, someone who's in a system like that, who has authority, they gotta really, really, really want this. The flipped organization, and to be willing to suspend their disbelief and help others suspend their disbelief that the system that they've learned and maybe seen lionized in the media that they've been consuming for 30, 40, 50 years, that there is another way, and that just hang with me for 90 days, hang with me through the flips, and I want this, and here's why I want it, and you're invited to participate. You're invited. You're not coerced. I'm not going to tell you what to do in this case. You're invited. So, but it's the desire, the deep desire in those in authority is one of the levers to pull, in addition to, I guess, intervening in the institutional educational complex, right?
Sure. And we now see a generation, maybe a new generation of CEOs advocating democracy at work and human nature at work.
I would hope so.
You might have seen that.
I would hope that's the case.
Of Bayer, a German pharmaceutical company, German-rooted pharmaceutical company, he is clearly advocating this. I mean, building very much on Gary Hamel's work, I think there. So there might be hope.
Well, what about the different social political context of Germany and Europe in terms of being more receptive, given that industrial democracy movement did take root, co-determination, those movements, and not only that, but there's much more concern about climate change in Europe than there is in the U.S. I mean, there's concern, but it's not getting high priority. Whereas I think in Germany and other European countries, is that factoring into how organizations and corporations and that you've come across, are they thinking about this at all? Or is it just greenwashing?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, right? Is there an American, are there different trends in different regions and countries? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I mean, I've just heard offhand that from what I see is that, climate denial is it's not going on in Europe to the extent it's going
on.
Climate change denial is not going on in European. It is. Okay.
Yeah. And we have the most diverse and hilarious debates in Germany, for example.
Mm-hmm.
But
in the government, in the majority, is it? I mean, because here we have half the country in that mode.
And who's got the political will and the support to stand for something that would unify folks who may be skeptical versus those who may be standing on the hill and yelling out that this is a hoax, the end is nigh, the kind of crazy people. That again, I hold out hope that there's a sense, talk about this is empathy, right? That if I believe, and again, I may be totally wacko about this, that if you show another person, regardless of where they are ideologically, you show them enough compassion and that you're willing to listen and engage with them, that you will build trust, and that
Yep.
you can have an honest conversation about meaningful change that is mutually beneficial, as opposed to you are them, I am
Yep.
us,
No,
you're
absolutely.
evil.
That polarization and that calling people deplorables is not doing anyone any good, and that's why we're in the state we're in here in the U.S.
I have a slightly different theory. I have this theory that, and you mentioned the COVID crisis, Ron. I have this theory that the more society loses its spaces of dialogue, its spaces of conversation,
Space.
the
Yeah.
more the quality of conversation and of thinking and of consciousness will be in decay. And we have, in Germany, for example, I would say we had a string of governments, conservatives and more leftish, more rightish, over the last decades, that oversaw a decay in dissent, which is another beautiful topic you were writing so beautifully about in this book. So we haven't had so much, and I think America has pioneered the absence of quality of dialogue and discourse. I mean, the research is still very good and so on many frontiers. And there are great self-organized organizations in America. And I can only highlight again, W. L. Gore, Southwest Airlines, Davita maybe is a great example as well. Toyota is very strong in the United States. So there are these organizations that have maintained the quality of self-organization, I think, for a long time. But in our societies, I think there is this decay has happened, and so there is, and authoritarianism comes back with different phases. In Germany, for example, we have a AfD, a terrible authoritarian, right-wing, terrible post-fascist party, I would say, and they are getting much more votes than anybody would have imagined 10 years ago. So how does this happen? I think it's that we have allowed our societies to become less dialogical, less focused on dissent, there is less encounter. And COVID has dramatically increased this problem, I think. And companies, of course, are spaces of intense discourse.
That's true. Yeah.
So organizations these days, if the work environment does not promote the space for conversation, we promote the decay of democracy. Organizations need to be leaders in democracy. I think we that's the beauty of Kurt Levine's work, of Mary Parker Follett's work, your work as well. I think you have shown very much what is the architecture, the DNA of a democratic organization. Without that, how can we sustain democracies, democratic societies? I do not see it. I fail to see how it's possible. So I totally agree with the last words in your book here, in this book. If we
I think you really touched on something, that the space of dialogue,
universities, education, it's all in decay right now in the US, right?
Right. And that's why I was so critical, again, going back to business schools, is that dialogue is not happening in the classroom that I'm aware of. I mean, the kind of critical dialogue of, and history. History has been kind of erased from any kind of business. Philosophy, history, right? Absolutely.
It's why they don't teach Follett. It's why Follett isn't taught in management.
Right. Yeah, I remember when I interviewed when I first interviewed for the job at San Francisco State. My job presentation was something on history of management. I can't remember exactly what it was, and I remember the faculty in the room said, "Well, this was a very, very good, really good presentation, but it wouldn't work in the classroom." I'm like,
not invented here.
Whenever I teach,
it wouldn't work in our curriculum.
Whenever I teach in a business school, the first thing I have to do in the morning when I arrive there is to remove the tables and put in a circle so that people can really have a debate. I call it with the tables of teaching and the learners learning and the teachers teaching. I call that bulimic learning, of course, because you kind of vomit it all out.
I used to
bulimic learning.
I used to do crazy stuff like that when I taught MBAs, and remember I forced them
It's
to
not
read a
very-
Richard Sennett book. I think it was called The Corrosion of Character. And then I brought in a theatrical exercise of pedagogy of the oppressed. Or I can't remember. It was some sort of Brazilian approach to having
Freire?
people,
Is it Paulo
take.
Freire?
Yeah, but it was some theatrical approach of where some students would take on the role of authority
Mm.
or central authority or management, and other people had to take on the role of subordinates and kind of see how that felt.
And again, obviously we're here at kind of towards the end, but I can't help but say that in a self-managed democratic organization, as we're talking about here, the great man, the Musk, the Bezos, the Tim Cook, that can you name the folks who stand at the top of your Morning Stars, your W. Al Gore, your Handelsbanken? And that they're not these celebrities, that there's this whole celebrity worship that happens in the US, at least, the Hollywoodization of the Jack Welch. And this, that, hey man, we're strong. We get rid of the bottom 3% that aren't producing. And in the self-managed organization, that's not it, man. That's we're doing what's right, and we're having great results, but you don't hear about it because we don't get pushed forward.
Well, that's very interesting because you look on Business Week, Fortune, it's the hero, the heroic CEO that's portrayed, and it now reminds me of that article a long time ago. I think Robert Reich used to be the labor secretary under Clinton, I think. He wrote a book. He wrote an article called "The Team as Hero." That and that goes to social creativity. The idea of the lone genius, the idea of rugged individualism, hyper individualism. We focus on the sort of the heroic leader, and basically don't understand what made that leader heroic. What was going on around him? Like in
that's why we fight the term leader, even, by the way. We try to do that consistently, right? To promote that the mere notion of leaders and leading is authoritarian in a way.
It is, yeah.
It is not. Yeah. If you believe in democracy, you should not use that kind of term. You should believe in the heroic team. That's a good way to put it. Not in the heroic in leaders or followers.
Or competence. Okay. Competence, which is shared and fluid.
Confidence, you mean?
Competence.
Oh, yeah, mastery.
Group mastery. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Good. How do we end on a high note? Together.
Here. Well, I think
I'm going to go for a B flat.
Right? Read this book. Read this book, everyone. It is a little bit out of print, but there are copies available. I checked today. There are copies available. It's one of the finest business books in history. You need to read at least the first half of this book. That's my recommendation. And you have to read the wonderful article by Ron Purser from Current Affairs. It's called Against Managerialism. It's just brilliant. Beautiful writing. Oh my God, it's too good to be business writing. Yes.
And we've got all these links on betacodex.org. The book list that we've got. Ron,
we have to leave another word to. Ron has to make another. What's your?
Well, first of all, let me thank you, Niels and Ryan. I'm just overwhelmed by the support and encouragement that you've been putting out on social media, and I didn't realize the extent that you so deep into my book. I'm just touched.
Okay,
I'm very touched.
Be aware that we have. I mean, not just that. I'm personally a big fan of your work. I think your intellectuality, your actual intellectualism, the quality of your writing. You're just a unique figure here, right?
Thank you.
I want to see more. I want to see more in this direction. But I'm curious as well. What's next for you? Do you want to talk a little about that? What's next for you?
Well, I'm working on a project that's more, you could say, spiritual. I'm
working on. You have been a Buddhist for a long time.
Yeah. I'm working on a 3-volume series. It's in the Buddhist tradition. This is not a Buddhist book, though, but certain teachings come out, and then people write commentaries on them to help them make them more accessible, ways to understand. So I'm writing a commentary on a seminal book that I've studied since 1982 by a Tibetan Lama, one of the first Tibetan Nyingma tradition lamas who came to the United States in 1969. His name is Tarthang Tuku. He's still alive. I think he's about 89 years old. But he came here in 1969 penniless, couldn't even speak English. But anyway, I stumbled upon this book accidentally back around 1982, and I haven't looked back. So I'm writing a commentary. It's going to be 3 volumes because otherwise it would be too thick. So I have to break it up into 3 volumes. So that's one project. But I do have some ideas.
Do you have a publisher?
I do want to. I want to try to get into this idea that you were talking about, Niels, that people aren't evil. People are not evil. We have to look at what's going on in the zeitgeist, what's going on in the culture that we can, try to offer a kind of a new vision of reality, which is not based on sort of the isolated sense of being a isolated person in a larger socio-ecological environment. So how do we, if we're going to address climate change, how do people, shift radically in their sense of what's valuable? Is it constant consumption? How do people make that shift? And so, that's the kind of thing I'm struggling with long term. I don't know what shape or form that'll take, but it'll be a new book down the road.
How to achieve sustainability and organizations and work and citizens.
More focused on the interface between our mind and the environment.
We are curious to see how that will play out. Very interesting theme.
Yeah, because when you use the metaphor of space, it actually is a very important metaphor.
Yes.
Because we're all sharing something larger than ourselves, right? I mean, we all depend on this environment.
Yeah.
Without it, we're dead. And so how do we create a new way of seeing ourselves in the cosmos? It's a cosmological shift of some kind. It's a worldview. It's like a cultural renaissance that has to occur.
Yes.
At such a deep level of society that it affects all our institutions. It affects our, the way we educate. This is a systemic kind of paradigmatic shift in consciousness that has to be taken seriously, but also there needs to be a way of understanding how did we get into the limited perspective we're in now, too.
Yes,
We
understanding.
have to understand that we're kind of confined into kind of like a regime of mind. We're confined in an authoritarian mind of some kind that's telling us stories about who we are in relationship to the environment. So in a way, it's the design principle too, at a consciousness level, you could say. So
I'm very excited to that unfolding, and I hope we stay in touch. I hope we somehow collaborate on this.
Yeah, I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful for your support.
This was a wonderful
enthusiasm.
Ryan, final words from you?
Just plus 9,000 to that. Let's be together with each other, for each other, embodying power in democratic organizations everywhere.
So be it.
So be it. So let it be written. So let it be done.
Stay on, Ron, for just a second.
Oh, yeah.
And, to everybody watching, see you again next week.
Yes, see you next week as I flutter through the designs and deals of our show today. Thank you so much for watching. Be well, do well, and hang in there.